I woke up bald on my son's wedding day, and the note on my nightstand, signed by my future daughter-in-law, explained everything. The hotel AC hummed like a stuck thought as I brushed my fingers over my shining scalp, cool and tender, while a soft halo of hair clung to the pillowcase. The mirror over the desk threw back a stranger in a silk robe, eyes wide, mascara smudged from sleep and sudden disbelief. Somewhere down the corridor a bridesmaid laughed, and the smell of coffee drifted up from the lobby like the world was normal. My name is Margaret Evans, I'm 66, and I stood barefoot on generic carpet, feeling my life tilt. The note lay on cream stationery flecked with gold, a faint vanilla perfume clinging to the page like a taunt. Use the shampoo I left you. Today is about us, not you. Thank me later. Ashley. The travel bottle on the sink stung my nose with an almond sweetness that had nothing to do with salon products. I could almost hear her cool tone as I read it again, the edges of the words cutting deeper than the paper. Beyond the blackout curtains, sirens faded, elevators dinged, and my phone vibrated with a "Where are you, Mom?" from Michael. My mother of the groom dress, a steel blue chiffon we'd argued about for weeks, swayed on its hanger like a witness. The corsage sat boxed in the mini-fridge beside bottled water, as if the world had the audacity to keep being practical. In the lobby, roses would be arriving. At St. Andrew's, the bells would start, and my boy would wait to walk me down the aisle. Shame, anger, and a raw electric panic built behind my ribs with each second. I'll tell you exactly how a seating chart, a speech, and a smile turned this morning into a calculated humiliation. If you've ever believed that respect and love can share the same room, you'll want to hear how this unfolded. If you've felt your voice shrink at a family table, you'll recognize every beat of what came next. I'm going to show you what I did, what I learned, and what I'll never ignore again. Stay with me, because this isn't just about hair. It's about boundaries, power, and a wedding vow none of us saw coming. And if stories like this hit close to home, subscribe to follow along. The truth is, I have always been a woman who knew how to make things presentable. I could smooth a wrinkled shirt with the warmth of my hand if I had to, coax a stubborn pot roast into tenderness with patience and stock, and take a boy born into a house that echoed with one voice, and somehow give him a family anyway. Standing there in that hotel room with the air conditioner rattling like a cicada trapped behind the vent and a halo of my own hair drifting along the pillowcase, I understood that someone had looked at those qualities and turned them into a map for hurting me. I cupped the back of my head, the skin cool and delicate as an eggshell, and closed my eyes until the room steadied. The shampoo bottle on the sink, almond sweet, wrong, sat like a culprit in plain sight. Ashley's note glimmered on the nightstand, the gold flecks catching light. Today is about us, not you. Thank me later. I wanted to laugh, the kind of laugh that shakes out of you when something doesn't make sense yet. Instead, I folded the note in half with care and slipped it into the pocket of my robe. Some things I have learned you keep, proof. Receipts, as the younger ones say. Michael's text blinked on my screen. "Where are you, Mom?" I typed, "On my way. I'll see you soon." Then I held the phone steady with two hands and took a picture of the shampoo bottle and another of the note. I sent them to my own email, to my sister Carol in Iowa, to myself again, just in case. I have always been someone who makes copies. I learned that at the elementary school where I kept the office running for 25 years. If the power went out, I could find attendance cards by feel. I could place a Band-Aid and a word of encouragement in the exact right spot. When Michael was little and the world got rough around the edges, I told him to breathe and count the red cars, as if noticing could save you. I did that then. Counted the red in the pattern of the carpet, the lipstick stain on a room service napkin, the exit sign's little glow. I told myself I needed to get clean, even if the word had a nasty ring this morning. I was not going to be someone else's surprise. Not today. The shower water steamed up the mirror, and for a second I could pretend there was a head of hair there. I let the water run over my scalp because my mother would have told me not to be dramatic, and because the wedding day needed someone to be steady, and because I could not very well meet my son with almond slicks still clinging to me. I traced a line down the faucet with my finger, like I was drawing a path back. Even bald, I recognized the tilt of my chin, the mouth that people say is kind, even when I'm thinking hard. I am Margaret, never Maggie, though I let my father call me that until he forgot everything. And I am here. On the vanity, my steel blue dress waited, the one we argued about. Michael didn't care what I wore. He always said, "Mom, you look nice." Like that was a fact he'd learned early and never had to reconsider. Ashley had cared. "No navy, no black," she said, curling her lip like she'd tasted something stale. "No sequins, it's daytime. Please be modern." Modern meant her palette, sage and blush and steel. Modern meant I wasn't invited to the appointment where her mother and sisters chose their gowns, even though I had waited an hour in the car outside the bridal salon with a container of lemon cookies I'd baked and a polite text from Ashley. "We ran late. Sorry. See you at the tasting." I have been on the outside of windows before. When my husband, David, was sick at the end, they moved him to hospice, and I was allowed to sit with him only from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. I learned the rhythm of the night shift by watching the silhouettes move behind the glass. I learned how to bring comfort that fit inside small windows. I learned, too, how to stand in a hallway and breathe and not make a scene no matter how my heart pounded. That's the thing about being a particular kind of woman. You make yourself into a nice shape that fits wherever it needs to. I dressed slowly because it steadies me. I buttoned the side zipper and smoothed the chiffon, feeling the give at my ribs. The corsage in the mini fridge sat in its white box like a secret waiting to be opened. White roses, a sprig of eucalyptus. Ashley's florist had insisted on a neutral. "No color that will pull focus," the email had said. I'd laughed then, imagining my corsage stealing attention like a misbehaving toddler, and clicked, "Understood." Now the box felt like a rule. I made myself tie the belt of my robe, sit, and think. I am 50 minutes from St. Andrews in Evanston if the traffic along Lake Shore behaves. I can stop at Walgreens around the corner and buy a scarf or a hat. My sister Carol is 2 states over and would say, "Do what you need to be okay." Michael would say, "Mom? Hello?" He would hear panic in my voice the way he always could. If I told him now, he might run. He would be late to his own wedding because of me, and I would spend my whole life hearing the echo of that. Ashley would hear it too, and put my name in the column next to disruptive. 2 nights ago, at the rehearsal dinner, the beginnings of this had started to show. We were at a restaurant with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, the kind of place where the menu doesn't explain itself, because of course you know what burrata is. Ashley's father ordered a Cabernet that cost more than my winter coat. Ashley stood to do a toast, cheeks glowing, hair perfect in a way that suggested 2 women had coaxed it and then sprayed it into obedience. "Family," she said, lifting her glass. "We love you, and tomorrow is about us and you supporting us. Please keep your stories short." Everyone laughed. It was a good line if you didn't look too hard at it. I wasn't on the schedule to toast. I had written something anyway, short and careful, a memory about Michael as a boy tying his shoe for the first time, and how he'd looked at me like he could do anything if he could do that. It was about him learning to go, and about me learning to let him go. I had folded it into my purse with a Werther's original. "Old ladies and children always carry candy," my mother used to say. "Keep your mouth sweet." After dessert, Ashley placed a hand lightly on my elbow. Touch without pressure. "Margaret," she said. Not Mrs. Evans, a name she used in front of her friends to be funny, not Maggie, which she tried once and I corrected gently. We changed the program a little. We decided to pare down the speaking, for flow. She smiled. The left corner of her mouth tilted up just so. "Our officiant thinks keeping it tight is more modern. I know you understand." There was that word again, modern, like it excused anything. Her nails were pale pink and neat. She had an engagement ring you could see across a room. "In that case," I said, "I'll send my remarks to him. He can weave it." I kept my voice level, The way you do when a student tells you his dog ate the permission slip and you know his mother forgot it on the counter. Ashley's eyebrows lifted a fraction. It's fine, she said. Really, it will be more about us. We all love your stories. We all love your stories, was the kind of sweetness that sticks in your throat. Later that night, I had clicked the wedding website to find my table number. Table 14, by the kitchen, right past the restroom. My name spelled correctly, a courtesy. A note under the seating chart said the first and second rows at the ceremony were reserved for the couple's parents and grandparents, and then a correction. Due to photography needs, parents of the groom would be seated in a neighboring pew. I'd read it twice, then a third time, because sometimes words shift when you care about them. Neighboring pew. Not like anyone else would notice, but I would count the distance in inches, in frames. Michael had called me that night, after the dinner. I know they moved you, he said, his words tumbling. It's not, Mom, it's for the photos, the light. She's been planning since she was 10, I think, and I just want to get through it. You know? Please don't be mad. We'll sit together at brunch on Sunday, okay? Just us. He reveres my quiet, like it means I'm fine. I'm not mad, I said. I'm making a note. He laughed. Of course you are. This morning, I took an Uber to Walgreens with my head wrapped in a towel like it would keep the morning inside. The driver was a young man with a baseball cap pulled low, a faint smell of cinnamon gum in the car. He did not look at me in the rearview mirror. One blessing of cities is that people rehearse not seeing you. At the store, the fluorescent lights felt like telling the truth. I walked the hair aisle, and my fingers trembled when I picked up a package of pretty headscarves with bright flowers and a thin, soft cotton cap labeled Sleep Turban. A woman around my age reached past me for a pack of bobby pins and caught a glimpse of me, towel and all. Big day? She asked, with the sympathy women keep in a pocket for strangers. Yes, I said. I could not say more without the words tipping out of me. At the register, I bought a small bottle of baby shampoo and 2 lipsticks. It helps some people to change something else small when the big thing shifts under you. A bulletin board by the door had flyers for a lost cat, piano lessons, a caregiver looking for part-time work. Once I'd been that woman stapling a tear-off phone number and praying someone would call before Thursday rent. When Michael was 10, he wanted to play hockey even though we lived in a place where ice was something you chipped off your windshield and cursed. We drove to practices before the sun came up, and I learned how to tape his stick, how to sew a button back onto a uniform that wanted to fray with use. I bought skates second-hand from a man who sold them out of his garage. He called me ma'am and threw in an extra mouth guard because he seems like a good kid. When Michael broke his wrist senior year and cried in our Honda in the parking lot, I took him to the ER and sat on a molded plastic chair and talked to a nurse about the weather because there was nothing else to do. I held his hand across 3 fingers and told him that you can be tender and brave at the same time. I tell you this because to make a child, you give pieces of yourself away on purpose, and you expect the pain of it. You make 100 little agreements with yourself and the world that you will go without so someone else can have. I wore the coat with the missing button until April so he could go on the Washington, D.C. trip and see where the stories we told in school had happened. I sold my engagement ring's diamond after David died and acted like I'd lost the receipt so Michael wouldn't feel like a thief of sentiment. I baked for the PTA until the oven made a knocking sound and finally gave up, and then I roasted chicken thighs in my sister's oven 3 blocks away and brought them back wrapped in foil that burned my hands. The shape of my motherhood was practical and sometimes small, but constant. I tell you this so you understand why a shampoo bottle could feel like an earthquake. Back at the hotel, I practiced tying the scarf until the pattern lay neat. The blue in the fabric matched my dress in a way that felt like luck. I swiped lipstick on, a soft berry, and looked myself in the eye. I have a way of smiling when I am about to do something hard, not because it is funny, but because a smile makes other people feel safe, and sometimes you need that if you're going to steer a day. I smiled. Then I picked up my purse, slid the folded note inside next to my reading glasses, tucked the bottle under a hand towel in case I needed it, as evidence later, and locked the door. In the elevator, A bridesmaid pressed stop with a painted nail and snapped a selfie of her and another girl in satin robes. "We're at St. Andrew's in like 45, she said, then noticed me and added, "Pretty scarf." I thanked her. The elevator shuddered and then descended. In the lobby, someone had set out a tray of granola bars next to a cardboard urn of coffee. I put one in my purse, wiped a ring of moisture off a table out of habit, and stepped into the heat. The sky was a blue you only get when the lake decides to be nice. The bells at St. Andrew's lived somewhere I couldn't see yet and chimed a half hour as if they were counting for me. I held my head steady in the car, thinking of the leaflet in the pew pocket that would have the order of service printed in tidy lines. I used to take Michael to church after David died, sometimes only to sit and hear someone say words that had weight. St. Andrew's was a church like a memory, stone and cool, light cut into diamonds by stained glass. My phone buzzed, a call from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated and then answered. "Margaret?" A woman's voice, crisp. "Diane. Ashley's mother." I pictured her as she'd been at the bridal shower, in a dress the color of champagne, her hair blown out into the kind of smoothness you buy. Lovely and decisive. "I wanted to touch base," she said. "Ashley's very excited. She asked me to check. You received the fascinator we left for you? To coordinate?" The fascinator. A little headpiece with netting that looked jaunty on the website and faintly ridiculous on me. It had arrived wrapped in tissue with a note. For Margaret. So we all look cohesive. Ashley had written a smiley face that didn't reach her words. "I received it," I said. I picked a scarf. There was silence on the line, the kind you can tell is someone taking a careful breath. Diane said. "Well, as long as photos are clean." Clean. I looked out the window at an old man crossing the street slowly with a bag of bagels swinging from his hand. He looked content, like bagels were a good job for the morning. "We'll make sure of it," I said. "I'll see you soon." I hung up and put my phone face down on my lap. Some people think quiet means agreement. It has taken me 66 years to learn it does not. At St. Andrew's, a boy in a vest held the door open and said, "Welcome." The lobby smelled like lilies and old wood warmed by sun. A sign on an easel read, "The wedding of Michael Evans and Ashley Thompson," and below that, a line that said, "Please take a seat. No sides. We are all family." I watched people read that and nod, as if such sentences made it easy. A woman I didn't know hugged me the way strangers hug when they've seen your name on a program, and I let her. I found the wedding planner, a efficient, pretty woman in black with a tablet and an earpiece. "I need to speak to Ashley," I said. My voice did not shake. She glanced at my scarf. Her eyes flicked to my face and softened. "She's in the bride's room," she said. "Family only." I held her look. She moved aside. The bride's room was a smaller chapel turned into a flurry of hairspray and tulle and the sound of women being helpful. Ashley stood near a window with a white dress that fit her like it had been cut around her life. She looked radiant, and I felt that the way you feel the arms of your own heart. I have watched Michael look at this woman like she is home. Seeing her, in her blonde smoothness and careful makeup, I understood, with a peculiar calm, how much we were never going to be alike. She saw me. Her gaze slid to my scarf, and for a moment there was a hitch in her breath, the way you sound when something goes almost wrong. "Margaret," she said, her cheeks dimpling. "You look—" She paused, which was its own sentence. I crossed the room. I kept my purse on my shoulder and my hands at my sides. "Ashley," I said, soft as you'd talk to someone in a hospital, because anything louder felt ungenerous. "We need to talk." The room stilled, as rooms do when women sense weather. Her sisters exchanged glances. Diane set down a compact. The planner, materializing like a helpful thought, said to no one, "We need the maid of honor in 5. "You look different," Ashley said. Then, as if the only thing to do with a problem is to narrate it, "It's okay. The photographer can work around it." She stepped closer. I smelled powder and the faint bite of hairspray. "Did you try the shampoo I left?" she asked. She smiled. It was the smile she'd used at the tasting when I said the salmon was a touch dry, and she said, "Well, it's not about the salmon." I took the note from my purse. I did not hold it like a weapon, though it would have felt good. I held it like a fragile thing that had been asked to do too much. "I did," I said. "I want you to hear me now, Ashley. I have been nothing if not respectful of your preferences. I have worn the dress you chose. I have sat where you told me to sit. I have even agreed not to speak when my heart is full to bursting. But this," I touched my scarf lightly, "this is beyond a preference." Her eyes, blue and bright, flicked to Diane. The mother's mouth pursed in a line I recognize from mirrors. Worry turned into control. "We don't need to make a scene," Diane said, in a tone you use with toddlers in customer service. "It's a happy day." "Agreed," I said. "That's why I'm here, so we can make sure it stays that way. Ashley, if you did not intend harm, I accept that. If you intended it, then we have a different problem. Either way, there is a note with your name. There is a bottle in my room that has taken my hair, and there is a boy I raised who deserves a wife who will not erase parts of him that are inconvenient." Something in her face shifted then. A tic I'd seen before when she almost tripped over a threshold in my kitchen and acted like she meant to. "Margaret," she said, "you're making this about you." There it was, the sentence that sits behind all the others. I let it land. I let myself feel the sting and then didn't wrap it in excuses. "Ashley," I said, "I have made my life about other people happily and with pride. My son is walking into a marriage today. That is about him. I am asking if there's anything you need to say to me before we do this." Her sister made a soft sound like a bird. Diane's fingers tapped a nervous little rhythm on her clutch. For a second, Ashley's lips parted, and I saw the child she must have been, with a birthday cake and a mother smoothing her hair. Then the moment closed. "We need to get dressed," she said, picking up the train of her gown. "Please respect our timeline." I turned to go because there are times when the adult thing is to withdraw before you say something you can't unsay. At the door, I paused. "I'm going to speak to Michael now," I said. "We will decide together how to proceed." I did not freight the word decide with all the weight it had in my mouth. I have always let my son feel like he is choosing, even when I have cleared the path 10 steps ahead. In the hall, the light from the stained glass cut my scarf into jewel tones on the floor. From somewhere, distant laughter. A girl running in sock feet. A florist whispering into her phone about eucalyptus stems. I took out my phone and texted Michael. "I am outside the little chapel. Can you come?" He came quick, as if the wires in him that carry my voice are still intact. He is handsome in a simple way. Good shoulders, clean shave, the kind of smile that starts in his eyes. He saw me and stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. "Mom," he said. His voice went small and sad at the same time. "What happened?" I touched his arm, because when he was small, a touch could make him stop crying long enough to hear a solution. "I'm okay," I said, because he needed that first. "I will be okay. Someone put something in my room. A note from Ashley suggested a shampoo. It took my hair." I watched his face do that thing where a thought arrives and he opens to it and then tries to put it somewhere safe. He reached up, without thinking, and touched the scarf at my temple like he used to move hair from my eyes when I drove, and the wind came through the cracked window. "Ashley?" he said, as if testing the shape of the word. I took the note from my purse and placed it in his hand. He read it, and then he closed his eyes. "I'm going to talk to her," he said. The boy who once threw himself between a bully and a smaller boy on a playground lived in the way his jaw set. "Michael," I said, keeping my voice as low as the hum in the walls, "you are about to get married. Weddings are performances. Marriages are not. Whatever you do now, it will echo. I want you to ask her one question. Did you mean me harm?" He opened his eyes. They were wet, and there was a long, blinking pause. "Okay," he said. "I can do that." He put his forehead against mine for a second like we were making some ancient kind of promise, and then he headed toward the bride's room, moving like a man learning the weight of new words. I sat on a wooden bench. An older gentleman in a suit nodded at me and said, "Big day." I smiled. It is, I said. I thought of every kitchen table we'd had, the one with a burn mark where a hot pot had kissed the wood, the one he carved his name into with a fork when he was 6 and couldn't stop himself from testing boundaries. I thought of Ashley, 19, and smiling on my porch with a college sweatshirt and a bouquet of grocery store tulips when Michael first brought her home. She'd asked if I had oat milk. I didn't. I'd made French toast anyway. She ate the edges and said it was nice. From the sanctuary, the quartet played a Bach prelude. Music sits in churches as if it belonged there forever. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. My own mother loved hymns. She sang as she cooked, her voice a light hum under the sizzle of onions. When I told her I was pregnant with Michael, she kissed my forehead and said, "There goes your heart." She meant it kindly. She meant I would leave pieces of it everywhere he walked. She was right. A soft rustling beside me and a small hand slipped into mine. Grandma, little Ava, Ashley's niece, looked up at me with serious dark eyes. Her tights had a run and her hair was in a crooked ponytail like a new flag. Auntie said you have a pretty scarf. Children are the only honest fashion critics. Thank you, I said. It works today. She nodded like she understood entire lifetimes. I have a job, she whispered. I throw petals, like a fairy. That sounds very important, I said. Ava's mother called softly and she skipped away, leaving a warmth in my hand like proof that kindness still exists in pockets. I sat and listened to the sound of shoes on tile, of people greeting each other with the polite surprise that happens at weddings when worlds overlap. From the bride's room, no shouting, no running, a calm that could mean anything. The planner came and sat beside me, her black binder on her lap. I can move your pew, she said quietly without preamble. We can adjust. She looked at me straight, not the way people look at the elderly as if they will break, but as if she thought I was capable. It was a small mercy. Thank you, I said. That would be nice. She made a note. She is the kind of woman who makes things smooth. Also, she said, and then hesitated. I heard you were supposed not to speak later. If you want, I can make space before the readings. 30 seconds. Blessing of the mother. No one will stop a tender thing in a church. She smiled to show me she understood rules and how to bend them. I felt something in my chest loosen. It was not a plan exactly. Plans belong to people who think they can control everything. It was more of a decision. 30 seconds, I said. I can be brief. She nodded and squeezed my shoulder. Michael returned 10 minutes later. 10 minutes in which I counted the panes of glass in a window and thought of all the mornings I woke him and said, "Today matters. Get up." He sat beside me, his hands empty. He did not look like a man who had been soothed. He looked like a man who had been given a task and had done it, and now had to carry the result. She says she thought it was hair perfume, he said. His voice sounded like it had been sanded down. She says it was a joke. She says she didn't think. He looked at the floor. She said the words, "I'm sorry," but it didn't sound like they knew what they were doing. I breathed. In, out, count the red cars. From somewhere out front, a bell chimed the quarter hour. "Do you believe her?" I asked, my voice quiet as cotton. He sighed and put his hand over mine on the bench. "I don't know," he said. "I love her. I know that, and I know you, and I know you don't make this up." He laughed then, a small, helpless sound like a hiccup. "I have to choose kindness right now, Mom, or I'll drown. Will you let me get married?" He was a grown man asking his mother for this permission, and that is its own ache. "Michael," I said, and brought his face up with a finger under his chin, the way I had when he was small. "I am here because I raised a boy to be a good man. Good men don't leave women alone at altars. Good men also don't ignore harm. Both those things can be true. You will make a life, and there will be days you will need to turn toward your wife and say, 'No, that is not how we treat people.' Today, I will not pull you away. Today, I will stand up and bless you. And then we will do the harder work." His shoulders dropped like I'd set down a load he was carrying too. He kissed my temple. I love you, he said. It felt like an inheritance handed back. He walked down the hall to where a man waited to give him a boutonniere. I watched him go, the line of his back familiar and new. The planner appeared again, efficient like a clock. They're ready for you, she said. She handed me a program. My name was there, spelled correctly. Under parents of the groom, it said Margaret Evans. No mister, no stand-in, just me. The sanctuary was cool, and the light made patterns on the aisle runner. People turned as I passed and nodded the way you do when a person is a category and a person at once. I took my adjusted seat, front row, far aisle, and folded my hands. The scarf felt like part of me now, not a failure. The organist modulated into the processional, and little Ava took her job seriously, placing each rose petal as if a path had to be a real thing. The bridesmaids came, in sage, like leaves. Ashley arrived at the center of the aisle, and the room made that sound people make when beauty enters. A small collective sigh. She looked at me as she passed. I looked back. A whole conversation fit between two looks if you let it. The officiant welcomed us. He spoke of love, of patience, of kindness that does not envy. I listened with an ear trained by years of lullabies and lecture halls and lunchroom politics. He moved to the readings and then paused. Before we continue, he said, the groom's mother would like to offer a brief blessing. It's astonishing how quiet a room can get. I stood, my knees steady, and turned. I looked at Michael because he was why I'd come. I looked then at Ashley because she was now part of our story whether I liked the shape of today or not. Be gentle with each other, I said, and heard my own mother in the words. Be gentle, because the world is often not. Share your lunches and your blankets and your grudges only long enough to examine them and then let them go. Speak plainly. When you are tempted to make a point, ask if you can make a memory instead. When you are tempted to be clever, be kind. And to the people who stand behind you, your families, leave room for love to change shape. If you choose your marriage each morning, you will be choosing your best selves. That's what I pray for you today. It took 30 seconds. I sat. There were sniffs. The ceremony flowed on. Vows were said. Rings were slid onto fingers. When the officiant pronounced them married, applause rose like a soft wave breaking, and I felt a grief and joy at once so sharp I could not tell where one ended. That is what love does. It pulls you in two and you say thank you for the ache. At the reception, the seating chart stood on an easel like a judge. Table 14 existed, but my name wasn't there. The planner had moved me to table 3, with my sister Carol, who had driven through the night and arrived with a Tupperware of Scotcheroos and a look that said, if I asked, she would haul a person into the parking lot for a chat. Across from me, Ashley's uncle asked me where I was from, as if I hadn't said it in the rehearsal dinner introduction. Evanston, I said, by way of Ohio. He nodded. Good football there. It is easier sometimes to talk about sports than the weather in a room where the weather is inside people. Speeches began. Ashley's father told a story about her taking charge of a lemonade stand as a child, raising prices because the neighborhood could support it. Michael's best man told a story about a camping trip and a raccoon. Laughter sat down at our table and stayed. Diane stood and thanked everyone for coming. We are so lucky, she said, to gather with our people. She glanced at me on the word our. After dinner, Ashley found me. She stood with her plate of cake like an offering. I heard your blessing, she said. Her voice was lower, the way people speak when they are near facts. It was nice. Her face was still, but one hand kept smoothing the napkin on her plate, then scrunching it, then smoothing. I can send you the product I used, she said, so you can file a complaint. She swallowed. It was stupid. It was stupid. She looked up at me, and there was no extra to cover the moment. I don't want to be stupid with you. It was not the full confession I might have written for her, but it was not nothing. Thank you, I said, because I believe even small bridges should be stepped on gently first. I will be growing this back, you know. I touched my scarf. I intend to. She nodded. I hope so. She glanced over her shoulder then, at our circle of relatives, at the life we were all now bound into, together like a quilt that had inconsistent stitching but would keep you warm anyway. Michael loves you, she said, a small truth like a coin offered in a hand. And he loves you, I said. That's the work, isn't it? To not make him choose between air and water. She smiled then, not the crescent moon smile of performance, but a small, human thing. I'm not very good at sharing, she said, like a confession whispered to a closed locker. Me either, I said. Not when it matters. We stood a moment in that kinship, and then she moved away into a crowd of people who wanted a piece of her dress, her time, her future. On the dance floor, Michael spun me slowly to a song we'd played on lazy Sunday mornings in our kitchen while pancakes sizzled. That kitchen had a window that overlooked a maple tree and a neighbor who collected wind chimes. Michael's hand at my back was warm. We okay? He asked into my hairless head so quietly no one else could hear. We're getting there, I said. We can be okay. It was honest, and that mattered more than plastering a smile over a crack and calling it done. Later, in the ladies' room, a woman I didn't know touched my arm and said, My mother-in-law and I didn't speak for 5 years. Don't do that. She pressed a tissue into my hand like it could soak up the future. Thank you, I said. I tucked the tissue into my purse next to the folded note, now a little softer from being touched. Proof. Not to haunt me, but to remind me when the sparkle of the day had settled and we were all tired, that sometimes people show you who they are and you have to decide how much room to give them in your house. We left under sparklers because Ashley wanted photographs that looked like wishes. I stood on the steps and watched them drive away in a car that smelled like rental leather and new beginnings. Diane took my elbow. Your blessing was sweet, she said, not unkindly. Thank you, I replied. He's a good man. She nodded off into the middle distance as if agreeing with the weather. Back at the hotel, late, I unwound the scarf and set it on the chair like a small, brave thing that had done its job. My head felt the air, and I put my fingers to it, curiously, gently, as if it were a garden bed where I would see shoots soon. I washed my face with the baby shampoo, soft as memory. I sat on the edge of the bed and wrote a list, because that is a way to turn a mess into lines. Call dermatologist Monday. Find a reputable wig shop in Skokie. Arrange brunch with Michael. Call Pastor Tom and ask about resources for family boundaries. We have a post-wedding brunch tomorrow. I will ask for 15 minutes. Not long enough to scare anyone. Long enough to say, here is how I will be in your life. Here is how you will be in mine. On my nightstand, the corsage lay half-crushed. Roses do their best even when mishandled. I took a petal and pressed it between 2 pages of my book. When I am older and the edges of these days soften, I will find it and remember the shape of this morning, the smell of almond, the cold of tile, the weight of a note in my pocket, the sound of my boy's breath steadying. I will remember that a seating chart can be a weapon if you let it, that a speech can be cut, that a smile can be something you hide behind. And I will remember, too, that the opposite is also true. You can pull up a seat for someone who needs a chair. You can speak briefly, but tell the truth. You can smile because you are choosing joy even when it is complicated. This is not finished. Weddings never are. They are opening credits, the music swelling before the plot settles. In the morning, I will put on another scarf and walk into a room where the coffee is strong and the pastries are arranged in little pyramids. I will kiss my son's cheek, and he will smell like starch and sleep. I will hand Ashley a plate with a cinnamon roll because it is polite, and because I remember being 20-something and thinking I had to be a certain shape to be loved. I will sit, and I will say, calmly, kindly, with all the grace I can muster, we are going to talk about what care looks like in this family. I will bring the note. I will bring my list. I will bring the love that kept us all from breaking today. And I will bring the belief that hair grows. Boundaries, too. They come in thin at first, delicate as baby grass, and then, if tended daily, they thicken and hold. I have planted harder gardens. I know how to wait, and water, and weed. Outside my window, the city moved on, as it always does. a siren far off, somebody laughing on the sidewalk, the hum of the elevator pulsing like a tired heart. I turned off the lamp and lay down on a pillowcase that had this morning held a different self. I thought of my mother's hands, of the night she braided my hair so tightly for my 8th grade dance that it stayed in place through my tears. She said, "You go where you're invited. And where you're not, you make your own welcome by being yourself." I closed my eyes. In the dark, my scalp warmed where it touched the sheet. Everything felt possible, and not in the easy way. In the way that means work. In the way that means tomorrow I will decide again to be present and whole and to ask everyone else to meet me there. The morning after, I woke before my alarm, exactly the way I used to on bake sale days and field trip mornings. The city felt softer, a Sunday hush patting the sidewalks. For a second, the quiet tricked me into thinking yesterday had been a fever dream. Then I reached up and touched my scalp and remembered in a sweep. I sat there a minute, my hand on my head, as if to reassure it that yes, we were still here. The scarf I'd worn lay folded on the chair where I'd placed it the night before, a small, brave square of blue and flowers. I smoothed it with my palm. On the desk, next to the note card with the hotel logo, sat the folded note, the gold flecks still glimmering even in the softer morning light. I had tucked it back into my purse last night, then taken it out again, as if I needed to see and believe, to keep my resolve from diffusing in the glow of twinkle lights and cake. I showered with the baby shampoo that smelled like the first weeks of Michael's life, warm milk and soap and a bewildered kind of joy. I tied the scarf with steadier hands. I put on a simple navy blouse and slacks and my sensible flats. I packed my purse with the kind of precision that calms me. Phone, reading glasses, a compact, a small packet of almonds, the note. I wrapped the little bottle I had taken from the sink in a hand towel and slid it into a tote. My fingers didn't want to touch it directly, superstition cloaked in practicality. Then I went down to the hotel business center and printed the photographs I'd sent myself. The note, the bottle, a picture from my bathroom mirror with my scalp bare and honest. I printed 2 copies and tucked them into a plastic sleeve. The hiss of the printer and the warmth of the paper felt like anchor points. I slipped my old red pen, the one that has corrected thousands of permission slips and misspelled field trip destinations, into my pocket. It had weight and purpose. It had always meant, to me, that there are things you accept and things you adjust. Carol met me in the lobby. She had driven through the night and her hair was doing the thing it does when she's tired, a hopeful curl collapsing into a shrug. She hugged me so carefully, like you would hug a person with stitches. "Hi, honey," she said. I hadn't been called honey like that since Mama left us both somebody to call. Carol could always find the exact word that held me upright. "You didn't have to come," I told her, which is the kind of lie love tells because it knows it will be refused. "I brought scotcheroos," she said, holding up the Tupperware. "And those little cheese crackers and whales, not fish, because Michael likes to be contrary." She looked at my scarf, then my eyes, and she didn't make a face. She just squeezed my hand. We walked to the little cafe where the brunch was set up. It was a hotel restaurant that tried to look like a neighborhood diner, all white coffee cups and a chalkboard announcing the quiche. The smell of bacon and syrup reached my chest like a memory. Round tables, clothed in white, made soft circles across the room. Mimosa flutes winked. Someone had set out a stack of Polaroid pictures of the wedding, edges curling, like proof the day had happened. Before we reached the door, a bridesmaid I didn't know spotted us and glided over in a sundress that looked expensive without trying. "Mrs. Evans," she said, then corrected herself. "Margaret." She beamed like she was about to deliver a pleasant surprise. "Ashley asked me to check that you're up for photos. The photographer wants a cute shot of the moms holding the bouquet together. She thought the scarf could be, a fun moment, like a statement." I looked at her cheerful face, blank of malice, full of task. "I'm not a moment," I said gently, because the girl was 23 and doing a job. "I'm a person. Please tell her we'll talk after brunch." The girl's mouth made an O of confusion. Then she nodded and flitted away, relieved to be a messenger again and not a witness. As we waited for the elevator, Carol's voice went low. "Do you want me to run interference today? I can be the loud one." "I think I need to be the clear one," I said. "But I'm grateful for backup." We stepped into a room that thrummed with the particular buzz of next-day events, tired happiness, a little glitter left over along the cheekbones, the relieved slouch of people who had taken off their good shoes. Diane moved across the room with purpose, a plate in her hand like a baton. "Margaret," she said, her gaze flicking, always counting. "So glad you could make it. Help yourself. We have a station with gluten-free options in the corner." She smiled, that polite, comprehensive smile that says, "See? Accommodations." She had chosen a pale blue dress that matched the interior decorator's idea of taste. For a second, I saw in her the girl she must have been, playing hostess with napkins arranged by color. I have compassion even for the people who hurt me. It is a muscle that doesn't switch off. "Thank you," I said. "We'll sit over there." I motioned toward a table near the window where the light fell kindly. People stopped to touch my arm or nod. "Nice service, beautiful church, lovely blessing. Congratulations." A cousin of Ashley's leaned in, conspiratorial. "Brave scarf," she whispered, like it was a team she was rooting for. An old neighbor from Michael's high school years blinked at me and said, Are you feeling all right?" She tapped her own hairline and reddened immediately at her own gesture. "I'm okay," I said, and added because sometimes strangers needed something to hold. "Thank you for asking." At the buffet, the scrambled eggs looked like you could spread them on toast, and they would sit politely. A man with a chef's hat slid pancakes onto a little plate for a boy with freckles. One of the groomsmen, looking softer without the jacket, poured coffee into a cup for someone's aunt. There are ways people show decency without making announcements, and I took a breath to notice them. Behind us, a TV on the wall played a slideshow with photos the photographer had already turned around because modern life expects speed. Michael in the tiny striped overalls I loved. Ashley holding a bouquet of peonies so big it looked like it could float her. Their engagement pictures by the lake, the water making that silvery backdrop photographers love. And then, a series of childhood photos of Michael, curated by someone else's hand. The edges of me were missing. The shot of Michael at the zoo petting a goat, my body cropped out so his hand hovered in the air, loving nothing. The picture of the science fair with his volcano, where you could still see the cuff of my sweater, but the rest of me had been trimmed tight. The Christmas morning, where the angle was convenient enough to include the tree, the paper, the toy train, but not the woman behind the camera holding the day together with ribbon and tape. It is a particular kind of skill, to erase a person not by cutting their face, but by cutting the angles where they live. Carol saw it too. She breathed out through her nose in that way she does when she's about to scold someone for not returning a casserole dish. "You don't crop the maker," she said softly. "That's a rule of the universe." I felt that balance inside me shift, the one I have trained into calm so many times. I thought about all the small cuts that had brought us here, each one easy to explain away if you wanted to believe the best. The bridal shower where the game asked, "What is Michael's favorite meal?" And Ashley's sister loudly corrected my answer because he loves my spaghetti, even though the boy had eaten my roast chicken every Sunday for 8 years with the devotion of a parishioner. The family group chat where Ashley set a rule that all plans with Michael should run through her because schedules are easier when centralized, and I said, "Certainly," and then watched as my texts disappeared into a spooling thread of brunch plans I hadn't been invited to. The registry, where my offer to buy their bed, "It will be my gift, so your first sleep is on me," was met with a polite note. "We've selected a more modern frame. Please consider contributing to our honeymoon fund instead." The time she asked if, when the baby came someday, I would be comfortable being called Grammy, because Grandma sounds old next to Diane, who will be Lola. It's cuter. I had smiled and said names or shapes we fill, and then gone home and cried in my kitchen over a pot of soup I'd been stirring with a spoon that had also stirred David's coffee. Each thing by itself was survivable. Together, they were a map somebody had drawn in pencil first and then traced in ink. Michael came and kissed my cheek. His eyes were shadowed with the weight of decisions made too quickly. "You look good," he said, and he meant it because he sees my inside first. I touched his tie, a habit. "We have business today," I told him, quiet as a prayer. He nodded. "I'm ready," he said. A muscle jumped in his jaw. His hands found a purpose in refilling my coffee, and I let him have it. Ashley walked in 10 minutes later in a white sundress like a coda to yesterday. She looked young and beautiful and tired, and all those things lived peacefully together in my sight. She made her way around the room with the practiced grace of someone who has planned a party with seating assignments. When she reached our table, she stopped. She looked at Carol, taking in the sister who looks like me but talks faster, and then at me, at the scarf, at the pen in my hand. She smiled, and it wasn't unkind, but it was a smile designed for photographs. "Good morning," she said. "How is everyone?" "We're here," I said, which is an answer that covers a lot. The planner was not there to orchestrate this part of the story. It was just families and coffee and eggs. A woman in Ashley's family tapped a spoon on a glass for toasts and then laughed that it was too early for toasts and sat down again. People returned to conversations about flights and Monday meetings and how beautiful the weather had been. I placed my palm flat on the table to feel the grain of the wood underneath the linen. I thought of how many tables I have sat at, smoothing my voice so it wouldn't catch on anyone else's comfort. I thought of how I have been told, with sweetness, where to sit. The tide rose in me then, gentle, inexorable. This was the moment I had promised myself. I could either let it pass and watch the water take the shoreline, or I could mark it. I stood, not with a clatter, but with the kind of stillness that makes people look up. I picked up my coffee cup, not to tap, but to hold. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying better than I expected it to. 25 years in an elementary school will teach you how to make yourself heard without raising a ruckus. "I'm Margaret. I'm Michael's mother. I would like to speak for a minute." Conversations dwindled. Chairs shifted. Someone turned down the slideshow volume. Carol took a breath like she was ready to clear a path if necessary. "I love my son," I said. "I suspect that is obvious, and I have worked very hard for years to make room smooth for other people. It is a kind of gift if it comes from love. It is a trap if it is a requirement to be allowed in. Yesterday morning, I woke up without my hair. On my nightstand there was a note. I reached into my purse and took out the folded cream card. I unfolded it. The gold flecks winked at me like an old joke that had finally told the truth. It said, "Use the shampoo I left you. Today is about us, not you. Thank me later. Ashley." A sound moved through the room. Surprise. The intake of breath people sometimes try to hide. Diane stood half up, then sat back, as if her legs and her pride couldn't agree. Ashley's face drained, then flushed, then settled into a taut mask. "I am not here to embarrass anyone," I continued, and I meant it. "I am here to state facts and to draw a line so that I can walk forward with my head up. I took a shower with what I now know was not shampoo meant for me. I own that I trusted what was left in my room. I am a person who trusts when someone calls me family. My hair came out into my hands. I made adjustments. I told myself the day could still be good, and it was in many ways. I blessed my son and his wife because I believe in blessings. I smiled because I chose joy to stand beside pain. I held the note up, not like a villain reveal in a play, but like something that had lived in my pocket too long. But I will not pretend this did not happen. I will not let a seating chart, a program revision, a random crop of a photograph, a list of modern preferences, and now a bottle on my sink revise me out of a story I helped write. I am not a villain. I am not an obstacle. I am not a guest at the window. I am his mother. Silence has a texture when it is ready to break. Michael stood then, as if he could no longer sit and be a child. He came to my side and put his hand on my shoulder with a steadiness that I had once taught him and now needed to borrow back. "She is telling the truth," he said simply. "I have seen the note. I asked my wife to tell me what she meant. I did not find comfort. Ashley swallowed. Her throat worked like a bird's. It was a mistake, she began, her voice catching. I thought it was gloss. I thought... She looked at me, and there was a finally in her eyes, a tiny door creaking open. I thought you would overwhelm me, she said, the words dropping like stones. I thought people would look at you and not see me, and I didn't know what to do with that fear. So I kept taking little pieces back, the pew, the speech, the dress, the photos, the note. The last word barely made sound. Diane reached for her daughter's arm. Ashley, she said, a warning and a comfort. Ashley shook her head gently, like a horse flicking off a fly. Mom, please, she whispered. She faced me. I am sorry, she said then, words shaped as if she had tried them on in a mirror and not liked how they fit. I am sorry for yesterday. I am sorry for the months before. I am sorry for how I have held my fear louder than your love. I cannot give you back what I took. I can ask for an honest chance to be better. It wasn't polished. It didn't gather all the corners. But it was a start. I felt tears prick my eyes and I blinked them back. Not because I am proud, but because I wanted to see clearly. I have wanted an apology before and received a version that felt like dust. This one had weight. It was not enough by itself. Apologies are tickets, not destinations. Thank you, I said softly. I will accept the apology as a beginning. But because I am 66 now and have learned that beginnings need fences, here is what will keep me in this story with joy. I took out my red pen and uncapped it. The sound of plastic on plastic, a small click, felt like a bell marking a threshold. I will not be cropped out again, I said. If there is a photograph of my son's life and I am in it, I will remain in it. If there is a conversation about my son's life and I am relevant, I will be included. I will not route my relationship with Michael through anyone else. I will not be told where to sit when the seat is a way of shrinking me. If you have a preference, speak it to me with respect. If you make a plan that affects me, ask me instead of telling me. And most importantly, we do not use surprise as a tool. I paused. The room stayed with me, which felt like grace. In return, I continued, I will bring my whole self, the parts that bake, the parts that show up early, the parts that cry when babies hold my finger with their whole hand. I will also bring my silence when it is needed, and my opinions only when asked, unless safety is at stake. If I overstep, give me the dignity of directness, not the punishment of erasure. I set the note on the table. I circled gently with my red pen the sentence, "Today is about us, not you." This is the part that broke my heart, I said, because I have built a life making other people's days about them. I volunteered for every field day. I sat in a window of visiting hours. I packed lunches with blueberries even when they were expensive because Michael liked the way they burst. I do not make this day about me by existing. Diane cleared her throat. She is a woman accustomed to smoothing and saving, and I could almost hear the gears in her head trying to arrange this into manageable shapes. We all say things under stress, she said tightly. Perhaps we can... Diane, I said, not unkindly. I think your daughter needs you as a mother today more than as a planner. She needs you to see that she did harm. You can sit beside her in that and love her through changing. You can also let her own it without polishing it down to nothing. Around the room, people shifted. You could sense loyalties moving like school of fish. Ashley's sister stared at her plate as if it could offer instructions. The bridesmaid from the elevator looked at me with a kind of dawning in her face, like she'd just translated a sentence she thought she knew before. I will try, Diane said, the words dragged up like an anchor. If you have ever watched another mother reach for humility and fight her instinct to defend, you will know how hard that is. I gave her a small nod. We are not the same, she and I, but we both have daughters once removed from our own bodies now. Michael stood a little bit taller beside me. He took a breath that I recognized, the one he took before stepping onto the ice as a boy. He turned to Ashley. I love you, he said simply, like a flag in the ground. I chose you and I will keep choosing you, but I will not choose you at the expense of the woman who made me. If you need me to, I will hang a picture of both of you by our front door and touch it every time I leave, so I remember the line I will not cross." Ashley let out a laugh, quick and wet, that made her look younger. "That's very you," she said softly, touching a symbol to make it real. We ate then, because bodies need food even in the messy middle. People resumed talking in the way people do after earthquakes, checking for cracks and deciding where to set their cups. Ava came and sat next to me with a croissant and asked if she could try on my scarf like a cape. I let her. She ran in little circles, the blue fluttering like a small flag that meant safe harbor. Somewhere behind me, the slideshow clicked past a picture of Michael in a Halloween costume, the one year he let me make him a homemade robot suit out of boxes and foil. He looked proud and uneasy at once, and I felt tenderness in my ribs for everybody who has ever tried to be a version of themselves they weren't sure they were allowed to be. After plates were cleared, but before people started checking flight times, I took out the plastic sleeve with the photos. I slid them across the table to Diane and to Ashley. "These are copies," I said. "I am not going to put them on the internet. I am not going to send them to your boss. I am handing them to you to keep. When you feel tempted to turn hurt into decisions, look at them and ask yourself if the outcome is the one you want." Ashley held the photo of the note like it might burn her. Her fingers, manicured and precise, trembled just enough to make me hope there was something alive in there worth saving. "I will take care of your head," she blurted then, and the room's tension eased for a second into something like a smile. "I mean, I will pay for whatever you need, wigs, hats, treatments, not because money makes it right, because I want to be part of making it right. Please, let me be part of it." I considered. There is a version of me that would have said no out of pride, and a version that would have said yes out of exhaustion. The one I want to be stands somewhere in the middle. "You may help," I said. "You will not manage me. You will ask me what I need. You will not choose my scarf the way you chose my pew. And one more thing." I glanced at Diane. "You will both make space for me to be called what I choose to be called by future grandchildren. I have earned Grandma. If a child wants Lola and Grammy and Mimi and Pop and all the names that pile up in a house, we will make room. This is not a branding exercise." A laugh broke around the room, grateful to be told a place to rest. Diane smiled for real, small and surprised at her own softness. "I can live with that," she said. The waiter refilled my coffee and set down a small plate with a cinnamon roll without being asked. He must have noticed I'd looked at them. Or maybe Michael had pointed. I broke off a piece and offered it to Ashley. She hesitated. Then she took it. We ate it like a sacrament, not because pastries solve problems, but because breaking bread together is one of the oldest ways humans have signaled to each other, "I am willing to try." After and around all this, the smaller indignities that had collected on me like dust motes started to settle into perspective. Not forgotten, not excused, but catalogued. I remembered the time at the tasting when Ashley said, "No onions in the salads. Some people don't like them," glancing at me because I like onions. I remembered a text where she asked me not to comment too much on their Instagram because she wanted their feed to have a certain look. I remembered offering to hem bridesmaids' dresses because I am decent with a needle and being told, "We're going to keep alterations within the bridal party." The way a line like that can sound inclusive when what it means is, "not you." I wrote them down later, not to keep a score, but to keep a record, so that when I felt unsteady about enforcing my boundaries, I would have proof that I was not being dramatic. I was being awake. We lingered until even lingering didn't make sense anymore. People hugged with that particular hug of final day events, promising visits that may or may not happen, meaning them in the moment with sincerity. Michael loaded leftover pastries into a box for the hotel staff. Diane coordinated luggage with one hand and held her daughter's fingers with the other. Carol brought me coffee for the road and whispered, "You were brave without being unkind. Our mother would be proud." And I believed her. In the lobby, outside the buzz of family, Ashley asked if she could speak to me alone. We stood near a ficus, the universal plant of hotel corridors. Sunlight filtered in and turned the dust in the air into glitter. For a moment, it felt like the day between seasons when winter lets go. "I don't have an excuse," she said. "I have a reason, and it's not good enough. My reason is that in every picture of my childhood, my mother looks perfect, and she is. And I thought that's how it had to be for me to do this well. But I don't think you were trying to be perfect. I think you were trying to be present. There's a difference. I can't promise I won't mess up. I can promise I won't try to make you invisible to protect myself." I looked at her, this woman my son had chosen, and I saw the child and the bride and the scared person. And I saw also, faint and possible, the mother she might become and the partner she might learn to be. "You will mess up," I said. "So will I. The test isn't if we mess up. It's what we do next." She nodded. Would you show me how you tie your scarf?" she asked, surprising me. "It's beautiful." I showed her. We stood in front of a mirror, side by side, our faces level for the first time, not because of heels or posture, but because we were, finally, speaking as equals about a thing that mattered. My hands moved slowly, making the knot, tucking one corner. "Not too tight," I said. "You want it to hold without pinching." Later, back in my room, when the quiet came to sit with me again, I took the scarf off and set it on top of the note inside the plastic sleeve, the red ink circling the sentence that had hurt me. I put my red pen next to it, the cap on, a small baton laid to rest. I dialed the dermatologist's office and left a message, my voice calm. I called a wig shop in Skokie a friend had recommended and made an appointment for Tuesday. I texted Michael to come by tomorrow evening. I would make roast chicken, and he could bring a bag of salad, and we could sit at my table and talk about what choices do to love and what love can do to choices. As I packed to go home, I came across a box of old keys at the bottom of my suitcase. I keep them the way some people keep seashells. They fit in my palm, a small talisman of what I have unlocked and what I have kept safe. The key to the old house on Maple Street with its stubborn front door. The key to my desk at the school, cold and silver and shaped like a question mark when you squinted. I held that one up and closed my fingers around it. It had opened so many things. The supply closet where I kept adhesive bandages and construction paper. The drawer where I kept notes from children telling me their dog had 3 puppies. The cabinet where we stocked emergency snacks for kids whose mornings started too empty. I slid it into my purse. It was not useful in a practical way anymore, but it felt like an object I could hold when I needed reminding that I know how to open and close what needs opening and closing. I thought, too, of hair growing, of seeds under soil deciding to be brave, of boundaries that start flimsy then root, of Michael's forehead against mine in a hallway that smelled like lilies and old wood, of Ashley's fingers trembling on paper, of Diane's mouth softening on the edges of a smile she didn't plan, of Ava in my scarf, a study in joy. That afternoon, when I stopped at the Jewel Osco on my way home, the cashier's name tag said, Maria. She was efficient and kind. She scanned my chicken and my lemons and my bunch of curls of parsley and asked, "Anything else?" I looked at the little display of seasonal items, sun hats and sunscreen because Chicago likes to pretend it is a beach town in June, and picked up a simple straw hat with a ribbon. "This," I said. She rang it up and then, for reasons I will never know, reached for my hand. "You have such nice eyes," she said, a compliment people give you when hair isn't there to distract. I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because kindness in a checkout line is a grace note you don't expect, and it shifts the tune. At home, I put the chicken in the oven and the smell of rosemary and lemon filled the rooms until the house felt almost like another person in it, a familiar friend returning. I set the table with the everyday plates. We are not fancy, and the blue cloth napkins that only make an appearance when my heart needs extra. I put the scarf on the back of my chair, not on my head. I put the note and the bottle and the red pen in a drawer. Not hidden, not on display. Waiting. The way you put away winter mittens the day after the first spring day that feels real. Not because it will never be cold again, but because you have decided not to live like it is. When evening came, and the sky over my block turned that particular Midwestern pink that never looks quite real. The doorbell rang. Michael stood there with a bag of salad and a face that looked clearer than it had at brunch. He stepped in, kissed my cheek, and took a deep breath of chicken and home. Behind him, Ashley hovered. She had a bouquet of daisies with the roots still damp, like they'd been in someone's kitchen garden an hour ago. "We brought these," she said, "for your table, if you want them." "I do," I said. I took them and put them in water, cutting the stems on a bias the way my mother taught me, under the faucet so they didn't drink air. We sat, we ate, we talked. Not everything was right, not everything was fixed, but we named things. We said out loud what we intended. That is a kind of vow, too. When they left, I stood on the porch a long minute, watching the shadows knit across the yard. My neighbor's wind chimes, the ones that had always irritated me a little because they clanged when I wanted quiet, sounded like a hymn. I put the straw hat on and stood under a sky that didn't care about weddings or notes or edges of photographs. It cared about being big and holding us all anyway. I am not naive. There will be days Ashley and I will startle each other into our old shapes, reach for control because fear is faster than love. There will be holidays where Diane and I will both bring a dessert, and one of us will win the table's attention, and one of us will smile and take the compliment to the other with teeth. There will be moments when Michael will stand between us like a bridge and wobble. There will be future babies who will throw all our promises into the air with their colic and their tiny, perfectly inconvenient needs. There will be Sundays when I am told a schedule, and I will feel the old ache of being directed to a seat. And there will be Sundays when the door opens and nobody makes a plan, and kindness walks in without an RSVP. Here's what I know now in my bones, under my skin, whether or not hair covers it. Love and respect can share a room only when the people in it decide to hold both, even if one of them feels heavier in the hand. A note on a nightstand can become a symbol if you let it. It can also become a tool if you pick it up and use it to draw a line. A scarf, tied carefully, can be a banner or a bandage. A red pen can correct a spelling or circle a truth so you don't lose it under other people's versions. A woman who has spent a long time making rooms easy can find her way to the center of one and say, "Enough," and mean it without raising her voice. Before I went to bed, I opened the drawer and took out the plastic sleeve and the scarf and the pen. I slid the red pen through the scarf's loop and tied a simple knot, making a small, strange necklace of purpose. I hung it on the hook by the door where I keep keys and umbrellas. It looked almost like art, but it was a reminder of what I'd endured, of what I'd chosen, of the next thing I would choose, which is to treat myself with the same care I have given everyone else for so long that my hands sometimes forget they are mine. In the morning, I will put on the hat and walk to the bakery for a loaf of bread still warm. I will call my sister and tell her the tiny graces she missed while she drove home. I will schedule the dermatologist and the wig shop, and because Carol insisted, a manicure in a color that makes me look like I drink pomegranate juice even when I don't. I will text Ashley a picture of the daisies on my table and tell her they are drinking well. I will remind Michael to pick up his suit from the cleaner and not leave it until the day he needs it again. I will write in my notebook the sentence that used to scare me and now feels like the beginning of a good map. I decide how I am treated. And then I will get on with the business of being a person whose hair will grow and whose boundaries already have. And then I got on with the business of being a person whose hair would grow and whose boundaries already had. I put on the straw hat I'd bought at Jewel Osco, slipped my scarf into my tote like a friend coming along for the day, and stepped into air that smelled like morning bread. At the corner, the bakery doors breathed out cinnamon and warm yeast. The woman behind the counter said, "Good to see you," the way a neighbor would, as if she felt the small ache I carried, but didn't want to make me name it. I bought a loaf still hot, the kind that asks you to tear off a heel right there on the sidewalk. I did. Butter in one pocket of a to-go cup, bread in the other hand. I stood for a minute and watched a father in a Cubs cap balance coffee and a toddler and a diaper bag. He looked like a juggler with his own applause in his head. The little boy scrunched his face at a pigeon and laughed when it took an offended hop sideways. Ordinary joy just feet from me going about its day. Back home, sunlight made rectangles on the floor, changing places as the hours slid. I set the loaf on the counter and turned on the radio. Old standards drifted through the kitchen like steam. My phone lit up with notifications I didn't check yet. I brewed coffee strong the way I like it and sat with my notebook, the red pen uncapped like an honesty light. My hand moved of its own, writing simple lines. Call Dr. Lee at 9. Wig shop at 2. Text Michael. Come by for dinner Wednesday roast chicken. Be kind to the part of you that is tired. It was a list and also a lullaby I gave myself, a way to keep from bristling at the quiet. At 9 on the dot, I called Dr. Lee's office. I'd seen her before for the odd spot that needed ruling out. The receptionist had a voice like a sweater, soft and useful. Can you come at 11? She asked. We had a cancellation. I said I could. I showered, letting the baby shampoo make its soft, comforting bubbles. In the mirror, I felt both brave and exposed. I don't think that contradiction ever ends. You simply get better at holding both without dropping either. On the way, I drove past St. Andrew's and rolled down the window just to hear the quiet of that wide stone and stained glass, still cool in my bones from yesterday. 2 teenagers in formal wear posed on the steps, some other family making a different story out of light and angles. And I felt a blessing rise up in me for them with no effort at all. At Dr. Lee's, I sat in a chair covered with paper and answered questions with measured clarity. She examined my scalp with a gentle hand, her face concentrating on truth. The skin looks intact, she said. You had a chemical depilatory reaction, likely a sharp one, given the sudden shed. It irritated the follicles, but didn't appear to scar them. That's good. You may see fine regrowth in a few weeks, soft, pale, like baby feathers. You'll need to be gentle with your skin. I can give you a soothing lotion, and if you like, a topical solution that encourages hair to do what it wants to do anyway. Try again. I laughed softly at that. That's my favorite description yet, I said. Hair will try again. She smiled. Everything living does, she said. We just help it along. She asked me if I wanted a referral for counseling, and I heard in those words the care of someone who knows harm isn't just a scalp. I have a pastor and a sister, I said, and a son who looks at me like I'm the son. I think that's a start. She nodded. It is, she agreed. And if it stops feeling like enough, call. On the way out, I paid my copay and stood for a minute at the informational rack reading the titles of brochures. Some made me sad. Some made me hopeful. A woman about my age sat 2 chairs down waiting for her name. She glanced up at me, then at my scarf, and gave me a look with no pity in it, just recognition. I gave it back. Then I went back out into a day that had decided to be kind. At 1:30, as I pulled into a strip mall in Skokie, where the wig shop was tucked between a tailor and a kosher bakery, my phone buzzed. A text from Ashley. I know today is your wig appointment. If you would be comfortable, I'd like to come. If not, I understand. I sat there for a beat and felt the weight and the light of that request at once. It would have been simpler to go alone. It would not have been braver. I typed, "You may come." This is me inviting, not you directing. She replied before I could tuck my phone away. Understood. Thank you. The bell above the wig shop door chimed in a friendly way. Inside, rows and rows of heads, silver bobs, caramel waves, pixies the color of ash trees, curls like mine used to be when I let humidity win. The air smelled faintly of talc and hairspray, and something else, maybe hope. A woman with short steel-gray hair and kind eyes approached. I'm Lydia, she said, as if meeting me at a potluck. We start with tea, she added, holding up a tin. Because when you start with tea, even the mirror is nicer. I took the cup into my hands and felt steadier just for holding something warm. Ashley slipped in, hair pulled back, dress simple. She looked at the rows of wigs the way a child looks at a museum, alert, slightly overwhelmed, wanting the right thing. Lydia greeted her like a niece, and then turned back to me as if to remind the room who was the star today. Tell me your story, she said. I told her the short version, the facts without the edges sharpened to hurt. She listened, then touched my scarf. "Beautiful choice," she said. "Would you like to play for a while?" It was the right word. She didn't say try on or hide or fix. She said play, like we could answer something serious with a little bit of joy. We started with a soft pixie, salt and pepper, the kind of cut I'd always wondered if I'd dare someday. I put it on and saw myself 10 years in the future, laughing lines deeper, eyes just as bright. "That's very you," Ashley said, surprising me. "I can see Michael's face when he sees you in that." Lydia adjusted the fit with small, confident movements, and the mirror returned a woman who hadn't gone away. She'd just changed the frame. We tried a bob with bangs. We tried a cap of silver curls that made me look like a woman who knows her own mind and tells a good joke. We tried 1-2 blonde and laughed together when the mirror said, "Absolutely not." Ashley, hesitating, tried on a scarf from a rack Lydia called crowns. It was a long rectangle of silk with a scatter of tiny cherries. "Teach me the knot you used," she asked. And I did, once in the mirror, then again with my hands guiding hers, the way mothers and daughters do when recipes and stitches and small magic want to be passed on. Her fingers were quick. She understood the gesture. Not too tight. Leave room for breath. We picked 2 wigs and 3 scarves. When I reached for my wallet, Ashley put her hand over mine. "Please," she said, "let me pay." I looked into her face. It wasn't about absolution. It was about investment. "Half," I said. "We'll share the beginning." She nodded, her eyes glassy with relief that I hadn't said no out of pride. When Lydia rang us up, she tucked in a small packet of sparkly bobby pins, just because, and wrote her cell number on the receipt. "If the world feels heavy," she said, "call me, and I'll remind you how to tie the green one." Outside, we passed the bakery, and I bought a loaf of challah that begged to be torn with hands and shared. Ashley took hers like a person who had been hungry for something she didn't have a word for. "He told me," she said, once we were in the relative privacy of the sidewalk's late afternoon hush. "He told me what it felt like to see that note. His voice—" She stopped. "I think I understand fear better now," she said. "I don't have to obey it." We sat in my car for a minute with the radio on low, the kind of old song that makes you close your eyes and tap your ring finger on the steering wheel. "When I was 30, I told her, I was trying to keep a house from falling down around us, and I was sad I couldn't give Michael a father who would stay. I was scared all the time, and it made me careful in ways that hurt me. I've learned since then that fear is not a good decorator. It will dress your rooms in hard chairs and lamps that glare. You can invite it to sit in the corner so you know where it is, but you don't hand it a hammer." She laughed at the image, a bubble of sound that made the air looser. "I love that," she said. "Fear as a bad decorator." She looked out the window then, thinking. "I made a therapy appointment," she told me, almost shy. "Not because I want to fix something broken, because I want to be someone who doesn't reach for scissors when patience is required." Her eyes flicked to me to see if I would scold. "I don't scold adults," I said. "It doesn't help, and it embarrasses us both. But I am proud of you for that call." When I got home, there was an envelope on my doormat with my name in a neat hand. Diane had sent a card with a photograph of soft blue hydrangeas on the front. Inside, she had written, in a hand that was controlled but not cold, "I raised a daughter who learned from me to keep days in a tight grip. I'm sorry I taught her that. I will try to teach her something else now, how to unclench. If you are willing, coffee this week?" I sat on the steps and looked at the words and found myself thinking of my mother smoothing a tablecloth until it lay flat and then letting the kids wriggle under it anyway to make a fort. I pulled out my old stationery, the kind with little daisies printed in one corner, and wrote back, "Thursday. Let's meet in the garden at the Botanic. It will be good to sit somewhere everything is growing on purpose." Michael texted a picture later of the 2 of them on their couch, socks off, feet up, the wedding veil draped over a chair like a ghost of celebration settling in for a nap. He wrote, "We're watching game highlights. We ate your leftovers. Ashley says the chicken is ridiculous." I wrote back, "Love you. Bring her by Saturday to learn the lemon trick." A heart bubbled up on the thread, simple and red and true. The next morning, I stopped by Pastor Tom's office at St. Andrew's. The church smelled like wood and lemon oil and the kind of clean that is both physical and spiritual. I told him the shape of it, not every detail, just enough to build the outline. He listened the way real listeners do, watching my face, not his watch. "You drew a good line," he said when I was done. "Jesus drew more lines than we give him credit for. He just drew them in sand so they could be redrawn as relationships changed." I laughed. "I drew mine in red ink on a cream card," I said. "It felt more permanent." He nodded. "Sometimes permanence is a kindness," he said. "You gave everyone a firm ground to stand on." That's what good boundaries are. Ground, not walls. I thought of my red pen and my scarf still looped together on the hook by my door, the small, odd necklace catching light when I come home. Ground, not walls. I wrote it in my notebook later with the red pen, just to see it in the color of my own resolve. Thursday arrived with a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to be dramatic or clear. I drove to the Botanic Garden early and walked the paths, letting the names of plants be like old friends greeting me. Salvia, echinacea, hosta, the Latin whispering like a lullaby. In the rose garden, I found a bench and pressed my hand to the warm wood. Diane arrived in a linen dress the color of rain. She looked like she had slept, and also like she had thought too much. We sat. "Your note surprised me," she said, before the niceties could make a maze. "You went public." She said public as if it smelled sour. I waited. She took a breath. "It was right," she said then, quietly. "It forced the truth to sit at the table instead of letting us hide it in the kitchen and bring out a clean dish." She smoothed her skirt and then, startling me with her honesty, said, "I don't know how to mother an adult daughter except to fix things she breaks, but some things are hers to fix. That is new to me." I nodded. "I don't know how to be a mother-in-law except to not be the joke everyone tells," I admitted. "That is my fear. It makes me quiet when I should speak. It makes me offer cookies instead of questions." She laughed, a burst of sound like a bird taking off, and we both looked around as if we'd startled the roses. "Let's make a list," she said, a smile tilting. "We like lists." We wrote on the back of the garden map, green lines showing through our sentences. We agreed on things you wouldn't think needed agreement but do when people care. No more surprise changes to anything that involves the other. No public correction as humor. If a text thread is logistical, include the person who is being scheduled. Holidays will be discussed in October, like a treaty. If either of us feels invisible, we will say so without accusation. It wasn't legal. It wasn't binding in any court. But we both signed our names at the bottom anyway, and Diane held the map like an artifact. "Look at us," she said, half amazed, redrawing women in the margins of a park pamphlet. When I left, I drove the long way home around the lake. The water had that sheen that makes you think of movie soundtracks and promises. I pulled over and walked down to the edge. A little boy launched a stick into waves that barely deserved the word, and cheered when it came back. Sometimes it is enough that something returns to you. Sometimes you don't need more than that. The photographer emailed the proof gallery that night. I made tea and opened the link, bracing. Photo after photo clicked past, hands linked, faces turned toward vows. Michael and I at the back of the church before we entered, his arm looped through mine, my scarf a little splash of blue that looked like a lake holding steady. Me laughing at something the best man must have said. Me, present, not as an accent, but as part of the chord. There was the goat photo from the zoo, and there I was, face and all, my hair rain-frizzed, Michael's small hand on the goat. I sat down on my stool at the counter and put my head in my arms for one moment, not out of grief now, but because gratitude has a pressure to it when it rushes in. An email from Ashley arrived right after, as if she had timed it for the landing. I clicked it open. She had forwarded a copy of the message she'd sent the photographer. "Please make sure Margaret is included in any cropping decisions as a subject whose presence matters. If adjustments need to be made for lighting or framing, kindly send to us before final delivery. Thank you." She had not asked me for praise. She had simply done a thing that was right and then shown me the receipt. Not for credit, but for trust. A week ticked by. I slept. Really slept. My scalp sprouted the softest, palest whisper of newness, and I would catch myself in the mirror and run a hand over it like a woman who can't quite believe she gets to begin again, literally on the surface of her. People at the grocery store smiled at me differently, not with pity but with a kind of unguarded warmth. It turns out that radical honesty looks like many things: a bald head, a scarf knotted just so, a grin you don't hide. Saturday came. Ashley and Michael rolled up to my house with a bag of groceries and a willingness to be bossed in the kitchen. I taught Ashley how to make the lemon trick so the skins throw their oil into the pan without turning bitter. And she taught me how to make a kale salad that didn't taste like penance. We bumped hips and said, "Excuse me," and meant it. Michael set the table and put the daisies in a drinking glass because my good vase was busy with peonies. We ate and talked and passed plates without the choreography of a show. The conversation found soft places to land. Work, silly childhood stories, the neighbor's cat that bullies the sparrows, the way the light comes through my kitchen window at 4 and makes a little rainbow on the wall near the calendar. When we were done, Ashley carried her plate to the sink, then dried her hands on a dish towel and took the plastic sleeve out of the drawer where I had slid it. "Can we do something?" she asked. I brought a marker. She pulled out a pen, not red, blue, the color of lake water and veins. She laid the copy of the note on the counter and carefully, slowly, wrote a line above the sentence that had hurt me. She added 2 words so that it read, "Today is about us, not you and not me." She handed it to me. "I can't undo the ink," she said, "but I can add to it." I stood there, looking at that line, at the way 2 small words can change the weight of a page. I took my red pen out of my pocket and drew a circle around the new sentence, an embrace you could see. I slipped it back into the sleeve. We all stood, 3 people in a kitchen, quiet in a holy way that doesn't need a church. Later, I walked them to the door. The evening had a softness that felt earned. On the hook where my keys hang, the scarf and pen necklace grazed Ashley's knuckles as she reached for her bag. She touched it, almost without thinking. "I like that you made this," she said. "Out of the worst part." I nodded. "It's a reminder," I said, "that I get to tie and untie what lives by my door." We hugged, not too long, not perfunctory. On the porch, she turned back. "Grandma," she said, trying the word on me like a garment she hoped would fit when the time came. "That okay?" It slipped into my ribs like it had been waiting. "More than okay," I said. She smiled toward the future, and it smiled back. Summer made itself at home. I wore my straw hat to the farmer's market and came back with beans and tomatoes that tasted like the sun had a say. I went to church and sang a hymn without crying. I met Diane for coffee once in a while, and we talked about herbs for the patio, and then, quietly, about the way our daughters, one by blood, one by marriage, teach us that letting go is not a single motion, but a series of imperfect ones. I sat with Carol on her porch, and we watched a thunderstorm roll in like a teacher who will not be argued with, and passed a bowl of grapes back and forth between us. On an ordinary Tuesday, I got a small white envelope in the mail. No return address, my name written in careful block letters. Inside was the hotel's final incident report. I had filed one, not to punish, but to note. The report said they had adjusted their protocol. No items delivered to rooms without chain of custody signatures. Registry and note delivered at check-in only. An apology for the way systems sometimes help people do the wrong thing. It wasn't justice in the grand sense. It was a hinge clicking into place, keeping the door from swinging the wrong direction. I tucked the report behind the plastic sleeve for completeness, proof that my telling had weight. The following Sunday, the church bulletin listed blessing of families, and Pastor Tom asked anyone who wanted to step forward to do so. I hesitated and then went, not because I needed a show, but because sometimes the body needs the motion, the standing, the walking, to tell the heart what it already knows. A woman with a baby on her hip stood next to me. The baby reached for my scarf and then pulled his hand back, like he'd touched something bright. "It's okay," I whispered. He patted the knot with his open palm and smiled with his whole damp face. The congregation hummed a quiet amen, as if we were all agreeing to be each other's soft place when needed. By Labor Day, my scalp was covered in a soft cap of newness, the color somewhere between ash and sunlight. I ran my palm over it in the morning and felt 1,000 tiny insistences. I wore my wigs some days, my scarves others, and sometimes I went out with just the hat and the courage. People saw me. The right ones looked me in the eye. The wrong ones glanced and moved on. I built my life out of those glances like bricks, choosing which ones held weight and which could be set down. Ashley started sending me pictures sometimes without prompt. A crooked pie crust she was proud of, the basil plant on her sill doing surprisingly well, a book she thought I'd like. They were small bridges, and if we didn't run across them, we at least stepped firmly. Michael came for Sunday dinners often enough that the roast chicken became a running joke. And sometimes he brought steaks, and sometimes he brought his laundry, because love is not just meals and speeches. It is the infinite kindness of folding a grown child's t-shirts while he tells you how a co-worker surprised him with a kindness of their own. On a late afternoon, standing at my sink, I watched a hummingbird fuss at my neighbor's flowers and thought of that morning at the hotel when the world changed and didn't. I pulled the plastic sleeve out of the drawer and looked at the note, now edited, and the circle I had drawn. The circle wasn't perfect. My hand had wobbled when I went around the words. I liked that. It meant a human had done it, not a machine. I took the little bottle wrapped in a towel out from where I had tucked it away. I turned it in my hand. The shape of harm sometimes looks like something pretty, like almond-scented permission to stop paying attention. I unscrewed the cap and turned it over the sink. The last drops fell, a thin line like a story coming to its end, and then the bottle was empty, just clean, waiting to be something else or nothing at all. I set it aside to recycle. We get to choose what becomes trash and what becomes an artifact. This one had work to do in another life as a piece of clear glass holding a single daisy. I took the scarf down from the hook and went out into the yard where the tomato vines had outrun their stakes. I tied the scarf around one of the taller posts, knots firm, the ends fluttering like a flag in a small domestic wind. It looked like a promise there, not a costume. The red pen, cap on, lay on the porch rail in the sun, warming. I picked it up and wrote on a notepad I keep by the back door. Be kind. Be clear. Be present. Hair grows. Love, too. I tore the sheet off and stuck it on the fridge with the magnet shaped like Ohio someone gave me once because I talked about home so much when I first moved to Evanston. That night, I dreamed my mother stood in my kitchen wearing her old apron with pockets big enough to lose a spoon in. She didn't speak. She set her palms on my cheeks and looked at me the way only a mother looks, like all the versions of you are present, and she loves them all. I woke with tears at my temples and the absolute certainty that the women who made me, even the ones I don't want to turn into, had given me something useful, a capacity for steadiness, a willingness to reconsider, a courage that shows up with a plate of food and a sentence spoken softly. What remains is this. I am not the woman who woke up on generic carpet thinking the hotel air conditioner's hum was somehow my fault. I am the woman who stood in the center of a room and told the truth without shaking the rafters. I am the woman who took a note meant to reduce me and used it to draw a wider circle. I am the mother who blessed her son not because everything was right, but because she believes in the work of making it right. I am the mother-in-law who will bring a pie and her own chair if there isn't one for her yet, and sit and eat and talk about nothing and everything until there is. If you passed my house now, you might see a blue scarf catching the light on a steak, tomatoes heavy and red under it, a small metaphor waving hello. You might see a straw hat hanging on a hook and a plastic sleeve tucked on a shelf and a red pen exactly where I can reach it. You would not see the quiet vows I say to myself each morning. Be gentle, be clear, be present. But you might see the way they steady my hands, the way they make me laugh at myself and with others. the way they make room even in small rooms. Hair grows. Boundaries, too. Love, if you let it and tend it and are honest about the pruning it requires, blooms again in places it looked dead. That is what I know now, under my skin and under my brave hat. That is the vow I renewed in a church I love, in a hotel lobby with hard carpet, in a wig shop that served tea, in a kitchen that smells like lemon and rosemary and second chances. And here is the sentence that sits softly in my chest, the one I want to hand you the way my mother handed me a slice of buttered bread when the world felt too sharp. You can be tender and brave at the same time, and when you are, the room makes space. If any part of my story touched a place you know, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments how you've learned to draw your own lines with love. Tap the like so this finds someone who needs it, and subscribe to stay close as we learn, together, how to be gentle and clear in a world that needs both.